Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. This is Ukraine War breaking news update for the 8th of October 2024. I say that, it's almost certainly going to be the 9th in just a few minutes, certainly in my neck of the woods. Right, this is pretty huge and it could be seen as an October surprise. Bob Woodward, who's a famous author, and someone who has written a number of pretty explosive books, has another book that is timed to perfection. But my goodness, it contains some absolute humdingers. And actually, at both sides here, like, it's a real insight into Joe Biden's effing and jeffing at a lot of world leaders. He is not the biggest fan of Bibi Netanyahu. Some really interesting nuggets coming out regarding their relationship. But the one I want to talk about, because it pertains to the war in Ukraine, is what we have found out about Trump and Putin. And it doesn't look good for Trump, and he could have fallen foul of the Logan Act as well. Not that anything ever seems to be done about that. So just to let you know, the Logan Act is a US federal law that criminalizes the negotiation of a dispute between the United States and a foreign government by an unauthorized American citizen. In other words, if you are someone like Donald Trump and you're accepting, Viktor Orban at Mar-a-Lago on sort of behalf of the US, or bypassing the US in some kind of diplomatic sphere, then you are actually breaking the law, arguably. And this has been leveled at Trump a number of times with regard to actually the Putin-Orban side of things. It's even more explicit now, because it turns out he's had 7 personal telephone calls with Vladimir Putin. And that's arguably not the most controversial part of these revelations. So, breaking news, says the New York Times, Donald Trump secretly sent Vladimir Putin COVID tests in 2020 and spoke to him up to 7 times after leaving office, according to a new book by the journalist Bob Woodward. As the coronavirus tore through the world in 2020, and the US confronted a shortage of tests designed to detect the illness, then President Trump secretly sent coveted tests to Russian President Vladimir Putin for his personal use, so on and so forth. Okay, so let's go and listen to a bit of the reporting on this.
But there's also some notable news about Donald Trump in this book. There are new details about former President Trump's relationship with Vladimir Putin. Specifically, the book reveals phone calls never before revealed between Trump and Putin, including a verbatim conversation where they discuss that Trump secretly sent to Putin scarce COVID testing machines for his personal use. This was at a time during the height of COVID where everybody wanted one of these. And we actually have, Woodward has the conversation between Trump and Putin in the book. Here's what they said. Putin, please don't tell anybody you sent these to me. Trump, I don't care, fine. Putin, no, I don't want you to tell anybody, because people will get mad at you, not me. They don't care about me. Woodward also writes that a top Trump aide, Kamala, told him that Trump had as many as 7 phone calls with Vladimir Putin post-presidency since he left office. We do not know what the content of those calls
Fascinating, but just the fact that he obtained the transcript,
Correct.
like you said, bringing the receipts.
Correct.
There are also several extraordinary...
So that's pretty damned incredible. We're going to return to that interview a little later, because actually there's some discussion about what Biden has said about Putin in that, which I think is pretty interesting. The Trump campaign has vehemently denied this in the strongest of terms, but I don't think anyone's buying what their denial is about. So anyway, this is the Bulwark podcast, or vlogcast. Sam Stein and Tim Miller talking about this.
Right. Yeah. So the reveal on that is that in the height of the pandemic, like right when it starts, the U.S. is just struggling, like every nation really, to procure and manufacture tests for COVID. Yep. And as we're doing this, Donald Trump, according to this book, talks to Putin and decides to send him a shipment of Abbott tests, like the premier tests. Putin is like, thank you, but don't tell anybody. Like this is what got me in this really. He's like, Putin has the wherewithal to be like, look, thank you, I appreciate the test, but don't tell anyone because this will look bad for you. And
Right.
Trump's like, I don't care. But Putin's like, I don't really care either. And so he sends him the stuff, which, look, I know we're removed from COVID and in the pandemonium around it and the abject fear about it. But had this come out in the time, like, it would have been a unbelievable cataclysmic political scandal to ship badly needed tests when Americans were dying, hoping to get their hands on tests, to ship them to Vladimir Putin is the type of thing that, like,
I mean,
the type
it's
of
one
thing that
thing-
you're like, that can't actually be real. Like, it almost doesn't process.
I mean, just think about the scale. It's like there's one that jumps to mind. There was a Democrat running for Senate, Alex Lasry, in Wisconsin, and he used some inside sources, I guess, or access to go get a test at a time in the state of Wisconsin when tests were only really being given to senior homes and high risk people. And he went and got a test. Massive scandal for him. Massive scandal,
Huge.
just to get a test for himself and his wife, right? So it's it would have been a huge scandal on its own if it was just Trump was hoarding tests for Ivanka.
And giving them to John Jr.
Yeah, or a couple of his
Yeah.
buddies at the Mar-a-Lago Club. That would have been a scandal. We know it was a scandal because it was for other politicians. So layer on top of that, it's not like he was giving it to his wife. He was giving it to Putin. Well, maybe Trump is the wife in this case. I don't know. But he's giving it to Putin, our enemy.
Yeah.
As Mitt Romney said, our greatest geopolitical foe.
Yeah.
That is madness that he was doing that. A couple of the
Imagine
layers on
just
this.
for a second. Imagine you're the government official who's tasked in that moment to make the shipment. You'd be like, wait a second, hold
Kremlin?
hold on. The Kremlin? You sure? Not Kremlin, Ohio? Like what are we talking? What are we talking about here? And how?
It is absolutely incredible. And, remember, this is at a time where Trump was withholding COVID supplies from certain US states. And he sent them to Putin. Trump told governors to buy their own virus supplies and then outbid them. I don't know. We almost forget all of these scandals that were taking place at the time. Trump secretly sent COVID tests, though, to Putin during the 2020 shortage, says the Bob Woodward book War. So absolutely incredible. And then we have Kamala Harris today incensed about this, and rightly so, speaking on the Howard Stern show.
Did you ever think in your lifetime you would see a Republican not supporting NATO and wanting to disassemble NATO? I mean, what world are we living in?
And
This is
NATO,
so weird.
NATO, which is the greatest military alliance the world has ever known.
It's what my
You wanna
father's
talk about
general.
strength.
Yeah.
That is strength to embrace that alliance as America, as Americans, and he would walk away because he admires dictators
Well, what did you
more
think?
than he does.
What did you
our
think of this thing that
lives.
just came out today? That Bob Woodward's book was saying that Trump was sending COVID tests to Putin, and Putin said, "Don't let anyone know." I mean, what is going on? What do you make of that?
So I actually said it even in the debate. I believe that Donald Trump has this desire to be a dictator. He admires strong men, and he gets played by them because he thinks that they're his friends,
Yeah.
and they are manipulating him full time and manipulating him by flattery
Yeah.
and with favor. And so, in the midst, to your point, as reported by Bob Woodward, in the height of the pandemic, and remember, and your listeners will remember, people were dying by the hundreds.
And by the way, I'm just going to pause it there. I completely agree with her summary of what Trump is like and how he does want to be a dictator himself, and how he does look up to these strong men, and that does leave him manipulatable by them. And we've heard his aides and security advisors say exactly that he was susceptible to this. So, this is not some kind of liberal tinfoil conspiracy about Trump. This is pretty much accepted by those who have worked with him and seen him enthralled to these sort of strongmen, politicians,
Yeah.
leaders.
Everybody was scrambling to get these kits, the tests, the COVID test kits.
Couldn't get them.
Couldn't get them.
Right.
Couldn't get them anywhere.
Right.
And this guy who is president of the United States is sending them to Russia, to a murderous dictator for his personal use?
We only wish Putin would have gotten COVID and dropped dead.
Imagine what would have happened if Biden was in that position, had been sending them to, I don't know, Maduro in Venezuela. Imagine the controversy. Or he'd sent them, I don't know, to anyone else. How do Trump supporters react to this? How do they assuage the cognitive dissonance that are in their minds? I bet you it's going to be something like, well, it's better to keep these people on side. He's trying to do this to be able to manipulate Putin, to get Putin to do his bidding. In order to influence these dictators, you've got to work closely with them. And that'll be naturally what they're going to go to, because that's the only thing you can say to this. But the reality is that Putin is the one doing the manipulating here. That Trump is just putty in Putin's hands. And we've said that previously, and this has done absolutely nothing to dissuade us from that kind of conclusion. It's incredible.
I wish that.
Well, the point being, that is just the most recent stark example of who Donald Trump is, that he secretly sent COVID test kits for the personal use of Putin, of Russia, an adversary to the United States, when he was talking about Americans should be putting bleach in their blood.
You can tell she's genuinely, I mean, this is a poor audio recording of this, and I apologize for that because it's not officially out yet. I don't think this interview, but my goodness, she's angry, I think, but she's also not holding back on who Putin is here. I think that's really important. We're going to go back to this with regard to what Joe Biden said about Putin. And we don't hear that rhetoric. He's a murderous dictator. When have you heard Donald Trump call Putin a murderous dictator? You haven't. Why? Because actually he likes him. How do we know that? Because he gave him freaking COVID tests. And he Helsinki 2018, go back to that all the time. He puts Putin's word above his entire intelligence apparatus. That's what Trump did in 2018, remember. He had that meeting with Putin that he didn't allow anyone into apart from the translator. No one knows what happened in that meeting. He comes out and he's waxing lyrical about Putin and agreeing what a wonderful idea it is if Putin can send his own Russian investigators into the US to investigate US stuff. Like, I get accused of having Trump derangement syndrome by people I can only describe as Trump cultists. Like, if you've got this far, if you're in 2024 and we've seen what we've seen about this war in Ukraine, and you still think Trump is somehow the right person for Ukraine, that he's got the Ukrainians' best interests at heart, that he isn't beholden to Putin, then I can't help you. Like, you think I've got Trump derangement syndrome? You've got Trump cultist syndrome. You've got Trump loving syndrome.
Think about what this is. Think about this person who wants to be president again, who secretly is helping out an adversary when the American people are dying by the hundreds every day and in need of relief. And instead, how did he handle it domestically for Americans? He mismanaged the whole thing.
Yep, nothing I disagree with there. And as Tristan Snell says, Trump had at least 7 one-to-one phone calls since he left presidency with Putin. Trump and Putin had those phone calls. Private citizens are forbidden under the federal Logan Act from engaging in foreign policy undercutting America. So we have 7 new potential violations to investigate. Absolutely. Lincoln Project says exactly the same thing. Private citizens are forbidden under federal Logan Act from engaging in foreign policy undercutting America. So why did private citizen Donald Trump have at least 7 one-on-one phone calls with Putin since he left the White House, in which time Putin invaded Ukraine? Just incredible. And we're going to go back to the CNN piece, because we're not going to go into what Biden said about Netanyahu, although that was absolutely fascinating. We're going to just hear his opinions on Putin.
Personal moments too, right?
There are some is talking about his legal. A notable scene that I believe is going to get a lot of attention, in which President Biden says he regrets picking Merrick
Picked Garland.
That's about Merrick Garland.
There is an extraordinary scene where Senator Lindsey Graham is the bag of different. Some people have a lot of phones.
I agree with that sentiment. As a reporter, Stephen Chung released the following statement responding to the revelations, quote, "None of these made-up stories by Bob Woodward are true and are the work of a truly demented and deranged man who suffers from a debilitating case of Trump derangement syndrome. President Trump gave him absolutely no access for this trash book that either belongs in the bargain bin of the fiction section of a discount bookstore or used as toilet tissue."
It hit a nerve.
I would say.
So yeah, exactly. It hit a nerve. I'm just going to find that quote from Biden about Putin. Here we go. So let's listen to that.
Fascinating, but just the fact that he obtained the transcript, like you said, bringing the receipts. There are also several extraordinary scenes between Biden and Putin in the lead up to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Tell us about that.
Right. So Biden and his national security team, Woodward writes, obtained this treasure trove of intelligence. They call it the crown jewels. It even includes a human intelligence source inside the Kremlin, the most sensitive source. And what Woodward writes is what they knew were the exact battle plans, everything about how Putin planned to invade Ukraine ahead of time.
And by the way, that sounds fascinating. I mean, goodness me, I'd like to see the details on that, because we do understand that the Americans and the British were the only people that were onto the Russians and were adamant that they were going to attack, and that appears to be partly because, or indeed fully because, not just from satellite imagery and from adding 2 and 2 together and making 4, but actually getting insider information from the Kremlin on the battle plans for the Russians. Absolutely incredible.
You also hear, again, unvarnished, what President Biden thinks of Vladimir Putin. Here we go. He says, quote, "That effing Putin. Putin is evil. We are dealing with the epitome of evil." So you're in the room behind the scenes as all of these things are unfolding.
And bring us into the scene when...
And that's absolutely incredible to get that insight. But it's there is a stark difference between the opinions of, as we've heard from Kamala Harris and Joe Biden here, stark difference between their opinions of Vladimir Putin as a dictator, as we've heard both of them profess that he's a dictator, and that lack of that kind of rhetoric and language from Vance and from Trump. And I think that's really bloody significant.
Biden boils over with anger against Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu.
Okay, and we won't go into that. So anyway, I wanted to just give you a sense of what is going on at the moment, because all the news channels are talking about this. I wonder how Fox News will be presenting this. I think this is an absolute bombshell. But is it a bombshell that the low information voters are going to find out about? Is it a bombshell that people in the middle are going to hear about and be swayed? Are the people sitting in the Fox cocoon and the Newsmax and OAN cocoon, are those people going to be inoculated from hearing about this kind of scandal? Is absolutely incredible that this has happened in my books. Let me know what you think. Let me know whether you think this will have any any effect on the election. I think it should do by rights. This in my book further invalidates Trump, who should be invalidated anyway, as a result of all his legal woes, and I won't go into those, but I think personally he's already been invalidated. I can't believe he's still in this race. And here we have another, what should be a nail in his coffin, but undoubtedly that 47% of voters are still going to be vehemently behind him. So, hey ho. Anyway, let me know what you think, as I say. Take care, and I'll speak to you soon.